Hello, David.
Hello, Nadira.
How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
Do risk specialists have a role in the risk process?
I think that's a very important question. Risk specialists have different names of the different job titles, and I think they reflect people's expectations of the role. Very often a risk specialist is called a risk manager. I think there's a real problem with that name. I have a video on the Risk Doctor Video YouTube channel called Kill the Risk Manager. It's 90 seconds, but I don't mean kill the person. I'm not suggesting we murder anybody, but I'm saying we should kill the title. Why do I not like the title risk manager? Well, it suggests that the risk manager manages risk. You have a project manager, manages projects. You have a program manager, manages programs. A safety manager manages safety. Does a risk manager manage risk? Does the risk specialist have a role with the risk process to do it? I don't think so. Why not? Because risks affect objectives. The risk owner is the person who owns the objectives. The risk specialist doesn't own the objectives of the project. The risk specialist has a different set of objectives.
So what's the main difference between risk owner and risk specialist?
The risk owner is the person within the project or the organization or the corporation whose objectives would be affected if the risk was to occur. The risk specialist is the person whose responsibility, their objective, is to make sure the risk process runs smoothly and runs effectively and people are able to contribute to it. So the objectives of the risk specialist are around making sure the process works. So that means that the risk specialist is not a risk manager. They might be a risk process manager, so I'm responsible for managing the risk process, and that's an acceptable title, or a risk champion, or a risk coordinator, a risk administrator. My favorite is a risk facilitator. I think that's the right term, because the role of the risk specialist in the process is to facilitate. Now, what does facilitate mean? It comes from a Latin word or an Italian word, facile in Italian, which means easy. The role of a facilitator is to make things easy for other people. A lot of people find the risk process difficult because we're not used to thinking about uncertainty. Or if we are, we're not used to thinking about opportunities, or we're not used to thinking about probability or response strategies. So the purpose of the role of the risk specialist is to make it easy for people. How does he or she do that? The risk facilitator makes it easy by knowing the process, by understanding what is a risk and what isn't, by being familiar with all of the tools and techniques and help people through, by knowing people, how people work, and being able to help quiet people to contribute and noisy people to be quiet and respectful, so able to manage interpersonal skills, and having the ability to smooth things over so that people can continue to execute the risk process. So the role of the risk specialist is to facilitate, to make it easy. You often have people who say, invite to a risk workshop, oh, I don't want to go to a risk workshop. I'm too busy. We're talking about things that will never happen. It's all depressing, waste of time. A risk facilitator takes those people into the workshop and makes it easy for them to identify their risks. And they come out of the workshop saying, well, that wasn't too bad. In fact, I quite enjoyed it. I'd like to go to another one. That's a successful risk facilitation where we've made it easy for people. So yes, the specialist has a role, but it's not to identify the risks, not to plan responses, and certainly not to implement responses, but it's to make that easy for other people by understanding the people, understanding the process, and understanding how they work together.
Thank you, David.
It's a pleasure.